That's
to
on.
make you look tiny.
Bought it at Prairie Lights. At least they're supporting our local bookstore.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and call our meeting to order. And it would probably help if I pulled the right meeting up on my screen here, but while I'm fumbling, I'm going to introduce some folks up here at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner and Directors Pilcher Hayek, Eastham Williams. To my left, Vice President Malone, Directors Clausen and Finch. Recording Secretary Kim Colvin and her understudy tonight, Amanda Yates, is going to fill in for us at the next meeting while Kim's gone. Thank you, Amanda, for jumping in. Appreciate that. Give the public a reminder that if you do wish to speak tonight during community comment, there's a form out in the lobby to fill out, and we'll get to community comment in just a little bit. But first up, we have our student representative updates from our high schools. We'll start with City High.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca McKaylee and I am one of the co-class presidents at City.
And my name's Ayla Bashir and I'm the other co-class president at City.
We only have a few updates. We'd like to start with our musical. It was a great weekend, it was a huge success. We did Big Fish. Our prom and party after prom was awesome, that was last weekend. And we're very proud of our dance marathon. They broke the record for most money raised in the history of City High ever for the University of Iowa Children's Hospital. And we're also very proud of our men's track and field, who are ¡1 in the state right now.
Yeah, and then other than that, all the seniors are just preparing for graduation. Yeah, we're really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you guys this year, so thank you guys.
Thank you so much. All right, next up on the list was Liberty, but I was told we didn't have a Liberty rep tonight, but I'll say it anyway in case somebody jumped in. All right, do we have anybody from Tate? Do we have a West High representative tonight?
Good evening, respected board members. Here's the last round of updates for the 2021-2022 school year from West High. For clubs, BPA winners, we have several. 25 students went to Dallas, Texas in the past week, and 19 of them received some type of felicitation at the National BPA Conference. Our All-State Jazz Band is also scheduled to be held in Des Moines, and they will be performing tomorrow and Thursday. The Jazz Band will also have a Cafe concert at the Coralville Center for Performing Arts Monday, May 16th, and we hope to see you all there. Our West High Choir Solo and Ensemble Festival is also set to occur tomorrow, so tons of things happening with the West High Music Department. For sports, today our girls and boys soccer teams are playing against Dubuque Hempstead. The girls will be playing at West High, and the boys traveled to Dubuque earlier today. Our boys track is also scheduled to have their state qualification meet this Thursday. The boys tennis team became the district champion, and 4 players qualified for state singles and doubles, the tournament that will be held May 24th through 25th. And we are really proud of them, and our golf, softball, and baseball practices are also in full swing for the season. For other events, West High Prom was this past Saturday at the Courtyard Marriott rooftop. The event was conducted smoothly, and students even participated in a flashlight wave to the Children's Hospital, which was somewhat halfway through the dance. On a less exciting note, AP exams are also being conducted through this week at West High, and we have made it through week 1 and are currently in week 2. AP. West High seniors are also extremely close to the end of the year with only 14 school days left, woohoo! And the senior graduation ceremony will be conducted in the Extreme Arena May 29th at 7 p.m. And with that, I would like to take a moment to thank all of the members on the school board this year for their service. It has definitely been a challenging year navigating through a pandemic, mask mandates, diversity concerns, and a time of high emotions. The board has been patient throughout, listening to the community and acting accordingly. Lastly, thank you for providing a student with a voice in a place so important. One last time, Adhika Shah. Thank you.
Thank you. My sincere thanks to all of our student reps that gave us an update this year. I appreciate your time and effort, and look forward to seeing new folks coming in the fall. So we'll move to our next item, our ICEA update. Brady Shutt.
Hi, thank you, President Eystone and Vice President Malone, Director, Superintendent Degner. So I just have to say, as an AP teacher, I find those 2 weeks very exciting, but I might have a different perspective on the AP test. So I'd like to just, last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and I'd like to thank Kristen and her team that did a really awesome job on social media of highlighting some of the relationships that teachers have built and some of the experiences that students have. So thank you very much for that. I think the end of the year was always exciting, obviously, with the graduation. And just seeing all the accomplishments of our students is really uplifting. I would like to give a shout out. We have an awesome alternative high school in Tate High School. We have a really growing and great online high school, and we have our 3 comprehensive high schools as well, for 5. And of the 3 comprehensive high schools, I'd like to just make sure that we celebrate that all 3 were in the top 20 in the state of Iowa in the U.S. News and World Report, coming in at ranked number 1 at West High School, 14 for City High School, and 20 for Liberty High School. And I think that's really a testament to the work that all of us in public education do here in the Iowa City schools. And certainly as a high school teacher, I know I benefit greatly by all of the work that the elementary and junior high teachers do to get their students ready. By the time they get to me as a junior or senior, the foundation's laid. So I will say I have it a lot easier than they do. So just thanks to all the teachers and to the district as well. So my time is up. Thanks.
Thank you, Ray. We can move into community comments. Just remind folks that they'll have 4 minutes to speak. First up, Casey Meyer.
Hi, I am back. Just as a reminder, I spoke last meeting about the increase in violence and discipline issues at Northwest that date back to 2015. I also started to talk about Weber and how it mirrors the situation at Northwest. I'm here today to finish up my thoughts on this topic. Weber has experienced an unusual turnover rate of principals. In the past 8 years, we've had 4 different principals, and we'll be welcoming a 5th next year as Principal Kasperek steps down from her position. I have to wonder what might be happening at Weber that would result in this situation. I'm also wondering if this might be a good opportunity to turn over the entire administration at Weber and start with a clean slate with additional mental health resources, fresh ideas, a team that can work together, and hopefully some stability. I'm currently very worried that as the school year draws to an end, we will begin to hear that many of our Weber teachers are resigning. Please be proactive and implement the supports that are desperately needed at Weber. As I've emailed back and forth regarding these and other topics, the district seems intent on blaming the pandemic and pointing fingers at individual schools who, quote, tolerated too much or mishandled situations. Regardless of the cause, I do find it disappointing that the district leadership is unable to take any ownership in what is happening in the schools that are under their jurisdiction. Because ultimately, the district administration is responsible for what is happening in Iowa City schools. As I have thought about why the violence and chaotic school climate have persisted for years, I've only been able to come up with a handful of possibilities. The first possibility is that the district administration is unaware of what is happening in the schools. Maybe the administration is aware, but not concerned. Maybe the administration is aware and concerned, but hasn't done anything to improve the situation. Maybe the administration is aware and concerned and implemented a plan and supports, but didn't follow up to ensure that they were used appropriately and that they were having the intended effect. The chronicity of these issues and the fact that they span multiple individual school administrations at both Northwest and Weber have led me to conclude that the district administrators have dropped the ball. Considering the state of our current school climate, I'm wondering if our district administrators can put aside some of their good but non-essential work for a period of time and get into our schools to fill the gaps and bring the violence and chaos under control. And last, many of our schools have shifted to a no homework policy. This is because research shows that the #1 predictor of educational outcome is a student's relationship with their parents or guardians. During the elementary years, the negative effect of that homework has on the student's relationship with their family outweighs any benefits. By junior high, it becomes neutral, and during the high school years, the positive benefits of homework finally outweigh any negatives. If we believe that a student's family life is important enough to change the homework policy, maybe we need to accept across the board that however ideal a school environment might be, it will always come in second place to what is happening at home. For that reason, I would like to see administrators in the central office do more to engage with parents and hold them accountable for their students' behavior, especially for repeat offenders. Considering that the majority of disciplinary infractions are committed by a tiny percentage of students at each school, in my opinion, this might be one of the most efficient and effective solutions for curtailing the violence and the chaos. Thank you for listening. I made it this time.
Next up, Donna Ooms. Ooms, apologies.
It's hard. Thank you. I love the energy that the students bring, the seniors.
And so I want to talk a little bit more about Weber Elementary as well. My name's Donna Ohms, like the unit of measure. And I have 3 students at Weber. We've lived here in the district for 3 years, so we have a unique perspective of coming in fresh from other districts. And so I want to take the time to thank you guys. I listened to the first board meeting 2 months ago, and Casey had asked me to consider speaking. I said, no way. But I thankfully kept listening, and I was so impressed with your thoughtfulness and your dedication, and just it's obvious that you care about the kids. So I have confidence in you that you are worth bringing issues to. So something that caught my attention was the high reliability schools idea that was brought up. And so I dug a little bit into that, and something that really spoke out to me, because when we moved here, I felt like something wasn't right at the schools. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but it just didn't feel like the school that I wanted my kids to be going to, even though I heard great things. I saw some great things, but it still didn't feel right. So something that the high reliability schools talks about was the idea that staff and faculty perceive the environment to be safe, supportive, orderly, or collaborative. They went back and forth between those 2 words. And in my time there, I've just wanted to talk to the schools, because I'm not in there, like especially with the pandemic. We haven't been inside, and so I'm like, teachers have the best perspective. So I've been trying to ask questions and be curious about what's their perspective, because maybe things are going great, and there's growth and good things happening, which there are. But what I found and heard was that teachers don't feel that and staff, that it's a safe or supportive environment. And some examples of that were in talking about like just the issues and how do we bring about change. Many teachers and teachers and staff said, we can't speak up. We've been told that we can't come to board meetings, we can't speak up and share what our experiences have been. And I go, oh, like you have the most incisive position. So I don't know why that is, or if that they have it wrong, but it was multiple staff. Another thing was that they don't feel supported because they've asked for additional resources in forms of more counselors or smaller classes. There's a lot of high needs at Weber, and nothing has been done. So another way that they have not felt safe or supported is they've been told that staff meetings are a safe place to process the difficult things that are happening in our culture today. And many witnessed at Weber a situation where something came up in a staff meeting, and the result was that a staff member was suspended and an administrator was suspended. So the message that got communicated to all the other staff was, hey, it's not safe here. You can't process things here. You can't figure it out. And so it just makes me worried for our staff. Like, I want them to be in an environment, because I think those messages that they get trickled down to our kids. And so if we want to have an environment where we're saying growth mindset matters, we need to show that, hey, mistakes are okay to make. You own them, and you say, here's what we're going to do differently, and not like try to cover them up. So I want to know if you've perceived this, if the school board or if the district administrators have spent time inside the school seeing the classrooms, not 10 minutes walking through, but a day, a week, talking to the teachers, what's their perspective. I was really hopeful listening to the high reliability schools that if it's implemented like the podcast that I listened to, that it would make a huge difference, at least at Weber. And so I'm hopeful that something can be done, but I would like to see more administrators in the buildings noticing what is going on, because I'd like our teachers to love their jobs. They make a big difference to the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing, sorry. One thing that was defined was the leadership, and this builds on what Casey was saying. In this podcast, it defined it as leadership was creating the condition in which others can be successful. Let's do that.
Thank you. All right. That was it for our community comment. So we will move into our next item, our agenda approval for tonight's meeting. I'd entertain a motion.
Oh, I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All right. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
I'm going to be a yay vote, Kim. I got to get logged in.
Thank you.
Yay as well.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. We move to our consent agenda. Were there any questions as folks were reviewing the bills that they'd want to bring up? Right, any items directors would like to pull from the consent?
I'd like to pull item number 13.
What number was that?
13.
13? Any others, directors? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve minus item 13.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further comments? All right, Kim? Kim and Amanda, I should say both your names today.
Online voting is open.
I'm going to be a yay vote again, Kim. I don't know why this isn't letting me log in.
Awesome. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, item 13, the Wickham Playground. Go ahead.
Thank you, President Eystone. I think because I wasn't here doing the process of the playground committee, Chase, that you led, and I think there might have been some board members on it, I just would like to better understand the process of how you choose and design the playground, what the different pillars are, the categories that you need to meet in order for it to qualify as a playground that meets the 88 criteria. So I was wondering if we could just take a look at this one, the Wickham one, for instance. I don't know if you want to go through that, or is Ben here?
I brought
or-
Ben, yeah.
Okay,
Brent
all
came,
right.
Ben came.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to Ben, and you're right, we did go through a couple of years ago a new framework of how we would pick those pieces and a committee that would work through that. And Ben's been kind of leading the recalibrations of our playgrounds through the renovation cycle for the last several years. And so Ben is here, and he can speak. Ben, you want to speak generally about the process and then specifically to Wickham as well?
Yeah, sure. So with each playground project, we developed a design committee for that playground design committee. On that committee, we'll have a combination of myself as a chair, along with the co-chair being the principal. And then we will have anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 PTO or community members, 1 to 3 teachers that represent the grade level of whatever playground we're building, and then we'll have the PE teacher as well as somebody with a special needs background. So then we go through and develop kind of a wish list. We go through a training process where we talk about universal design and how we're trying to develop playgrounds for students of all abilities. And then from that playground or universal design training, we start picking out equipment that kind of fits into that philosophy. And then we run it through the rubric and kind of gauge on how universally designed our wish list is. That gets submitted out to the playground companies who are familiar with our universal design checklist and rubric. They submit those designs back to us, and then we evaluate that and talk about that in a larger group. Typically, we narrow down those designs to 1 or 2 designs, which are typically very similar. Usually, we'll submit that to the PE teacher, who will take it back to the gymnasium, put up some posters, and then the students kind of finalize from the 1 or 2 designs that are actually left. So after we have that, we then submit it to the board for approval. We go back out, we build the playground. We continue to work on the side on hard surface games, as well as activities that are supplied by the school, which help fill out that universal design checklist. And then when we come back in a 5-year rotation, we evaluate that checklist and try to determine what we can add to the playground to kind of produce a more well-rounded playground.
So it sounds like a really comprehensive process where a lot of people are involved, and I do like that. And then you bring the students in the end. I just looking at them, for instance, the PK playground that you have here. I just had some specific questions about this one.
Mm-hmm.
There are some play panels that are on the ground, and it looks like you access the playground. Are you? I don't know. Do you know? You probably know what you designed it, so you know. But I'm just wondering if you have a student in a wheelchair, how do they access these play panels that are on the ground?
Yeah, so that gets a little bit complicated to explain, but essentially when you build playgrounds, a certain percentage of the equipment has to be handicapped accessible via the surface and that. With our universal design criteria, we make it so it's 100% accessible on the ground, so kids can access anything that's actually on the engineered wood fiber from ground level. And in how we know that we're actually meeting compliance is we actually hire in a third-party engineering firm that comes out and tests with the rotational penetrometer to determine if we're meeting the specifications for handicap accessible routes. And so what we really do is try to hit a higher standard where we're trying to keep the slopes under 2%, which basically means that a student can transfer out of a wheelchair without that wheelchair tipping over. So we have kind of those minimum standards. We actually shoot for above those standards, and then we test to make sure that we're staying within those standards. So something else I might clarify also is the 3D images you actually receive are ahead of the final design, so the placement isn't exactly right. Most cases we'll actually take those panels and we'll put them up closer to the hard surface, and it may not be depicted in this 3D image, but it's kind of one of those where they kind of put it in as a placeholder knowing this equipment's coming, and then we have to shuffle things around based on topography and hard surfaces and stuff, so.
I see, okay, all right. One other concern I have is that I don't see a lot of stimulating activities or relationship building activities, I guess. We just talked about in our mental health work session the importance of building relationships, and I know that's one of the pillars too on the playgrounds. And I guess I was just kind of hoping for more with the playgrounds. And I wonder if maybe the committee was hoping for something a little more stimulating than what I'm looking at here. I'm just wondering, is budget an issue?
So budget's not really an issue, but what you have in front of you is essentially the equipment we're looking to purchase. It's not necessarily all the equipment that's there that's going to be salvaged, and it doesn't necessarily represent phase 2 or phase 3 of actual design. So most schools have a phase 1, which is what you're looking at, kind of that base design to get the equipment, and then there's a phase 2 that adds more equipment, and phase 3. Oftentimes those are funded by PTOs, or it could be funded by district and other measures. So there's also other things that are going on with the district that builds on that. So there's also the hard surface games, which is all interaction. There's also art supplies that are supplied at most schools. Some schools provide blocks on the picnic tables, checkers, chess, a number of things like that. And then the positioning of the equipment's actually set up to where there's interaction. So you'll see the music instruments that are similar next to each other so they can interact together and try to make sounds and stuff. The biggest transition that's happening or implementation that's happening is the outdoor classroom, which we're building 2 of those per year. And that touches on some of those other items like natural plantings and having natural plantings in the playground area. There'll be kind of amphitheaters, there might be outdoor music instruments, there'll be more tables, and it's meant to be kind of that quiet social activities going on during recess and whatnot. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. So this is just a base?
It is. It's a base of one playground.
And there's a lot more going on?
And there's still equipment
Okay.
that's actually staying. So.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. You answered all my questions.
Ben, just real clarification. So the one with the white platform, are you saying like you might butt that platform up against a higher concrete steps or something that somebody might be able to get onto there?
Yeah, so that platform is very similar to what we built at Lincoln. Lucas, we built one. We have one at Mann, and it's essentially a retaining wall that functions as an ADA sidewalk to get to an elevation on the structure. So like the pre-K actually has, if I remember correctly, 2 points of entry. It has a transfer to stairs, and then it also has the ADA walk to get up to the elevated equipment. Those walls are actually serving multiple purposes depending on what school you're at. We design them to be seating walls so they can have like a recess or assembly kind of situation. Some of our taller walls are actually attaching climbing walls to it so kids can actually climb horizontally. And then most schools provide chalk to the students so that way they can do some sort of art decorative along the wall, and it rains and washes and then they can do it again. So those are strategic in placement and actually in installing those. So.
And this is, maybe this is an ignorant question, but how high is that platform?
That one, I believe, is right around 3 foot. It might go up to 4 foot in elevation.
So I'm thinking, because a kid could fall off of there and onto the surface, and I suppose that's safe. I guess and this is my ignorance, would it be safe if someone in a wheelchair fell off of that?
Yeah, so there's actually an ADA lip that has specific dimensions, and don't quote me on it, but I want to say it's like 3 or 4 inch lift. And it's intended to make sure the wheelchair doesn't fall off, as well as a blind student or a visually impaired student, if they were to hit it with their cane, they know that there's actually a drop off there. So those walls do have to adhere to certain criteria. So if we go over a certain height, we do have to have some sort of fence or,
Okay.
a fence on top of it. So we do keep it underneath that for those reasons usually.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, you don't mind? So Ben, this is Charlie Eastham. I have a question about the document entitled Wickham Universally Accessible, Wickham Universally Accessible Play Rubric Final 3. Is that something you have in front of you? So,
I can bring it up here, yeah.
okay, in that document, I'm mainly interested in the parts of the document that are highlighted in yellow. Which as I understand the description of the document, those are things that will be done in the future. And am I correct about that, or does that mean that they're being done now and now is the future?
So the proposed is what's happening now, what that playground looks like as a whole. And that's not just the one structure, that's everything going on through all the different ages as well as the other activities. And so that future project basically means phase 2 or phase 3, we need to come in and that's where we need to focus our energy. And so what typically happens is when I submit these projects to the board, oftentimes they'll see an alternate bid for, say, a sway playground equipment or a merry-go-round or something of that nature. That's actually getting pricing for that future project, and then I hand that off to the PTO, and they actually start doing fundraisers for that phase 2 or phase 3. So every 5 years, we go back into a playground, roughly 5 years, and then evaluate it and try to make improvements wherever we can, so.
Okay, well, it just seems to me that all of the, or most of the yellow highlighted parts of this rubric affect kids who use wheelchairs, who have mobility disabilities. So I'm wondering from the board's perspective, can we go ahead and accelerate for this playground these play elements, or whatever they're called?
Yeah, so.
On a faster time frame so that they're available to all kids?
Yeah, so this is an issue that we kind of run into with all the playgrounds, and that there isn't enough money to do every possible combination of things to make it, the maximum universally designed as possible. But there is the FMP 2.0 funding that we're discussing how we might use that and apply that to speed up things. Now, in the case of Wickham, we do have a phase 2 that is going to start. We've actually already started the design team. Because of the lead times, there's something like 6 to 9 months for this playground equipment. We're actually going to do the design, bring that back in front of you sometime in June, July to get that equipment for 2022 or 2023 build. And so that's actually in the process. So it's actually already sped up, but it just kind of it's kind of happenstance that it's sped up. But we're looking at that long term. What do we do with that playground funding to try to improve things? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Okay.
Any further thoughts or questions on this one? All right, thank you for the conversation. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve item 13, Wickham 1 through 3 playground replacement.
Second.
All right, Kim?
I'm a yay vote, Kim.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. And that takes us to our public hearings. We have 3 of them tonight, so we'll open up the first one, the Schemic Elementary restroom remodel.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Schemic Elementary restroom remodel project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 26, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 27, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. May 12, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 27, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to number 2.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the City High Annex Asbestos abatement project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 26, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 27, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 1:30 p.m. May 12, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 27, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we'll close that one and go to our final one.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed use of Secure and Advanced Vision for Education Fund, SAVE, to fund an athletic facility infrastructure project known as City High Tennis Court Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 26, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 27, 2022. The proposed project includes construction of 8 tennis courts and lighting with an estimated cost of $1,700,000 on a campus of City High High School. The proposed project will be funded with the issuance of SAVE revenue bonds. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we will close our public hearings and we can move into our presentations, and we have our quarterly financial report, and I'll turn it over to Les if he's got anything to highlight.
Just a couple things in the report for this quarter on pages 7 and 8 where it talks about revenues. You'll see the local and the state revenues are tracking right on projected through March in comparison to last year. The federal funding looks a little wonky this year, for lack of a better terminology. It has to do with all of the ESSER funds and the timing in which those come in, because they come in on based upon quarterly claims. And so we've only got 2 quarters in, plus a little bit from the end of last year that are in those numbers. And so it's going to look a lot different because of that. But one of the good numbers that's in the federal is the return of our Medicaid revenues to pre-pandemic levels. And that's just frankly because we're able to serve all of those kids with those services because they're in the classroom every day during the school year, as opposed to some of those kids not being there or not being able to do some of those services because of COVID protocols in the past 2 years. So that's a good thing that those revenues are coming back there that are listed as federal. 9 and 10, which is the expenditures and the unspent balance, those are also tracking. Our expenditures on the personnel are ahead just a little bit because of some of the COVID stipends that were paid earlier in the year. So the percentage at this point in the year is a little bit ahead of last year, but that will even out as we finish the year. And our unspent balance, we're still projecting conservative. We haven't completely factored out all of the adjustments that we will be making as we reduce some of the staff or make changes in some of the staff assignments as we take out the ESSER staff over the next 2 years. So we continue to work on that almost weekly to look at that and adjust those numbers. So that's a continual work in progress there as how that will impact the unspent balance going forward.
Thank you, Les. Any questions or comments from directors? Must have done your job right, Les. All right, if not, we can go ahead and move on to our discussion items. Again, Les. First up, our equity update. Looks like we're going to talk about our social studies curriculum. I don't know if you're leading us off or kicking it out to...
Sure. I'll just say good evening, everybody, and then I'll pass it over to Mr. Shutt here. He's going to take the lead for us on talking through some of the social studies curriculum review process.
All right, thanks. Sometimes these might, can you hear me okay from there? Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update. As you know, of course, we went through the first year of the curriculum review process for social studies last year by assembling a self-study team and doing an extensive review to identify limitations of the system and then develop an 8-year plan, to address those. One of the first things that we did notice is that our core curricular materials were dated and in need of an update, especially as we look to have a more culturally responsive classroom with culturally responsive curricular materials. So that's where we're at. That's the work that we've done this year. That's the first thing that's identified in the self-study plan that you were presented with last spring. It's not the easiest needle to thread, I will tell you that right now, because we, of course, want to be in compliance with state law. We want to make sure that we're aligned with the state of Iowa social studies standards. We have been, of course, watching anxiously with the state legislature and some of the transparency bills that are out there. Both the House and the Senate versions do have components that would change to a degree what we do in our government classes. It would become a little bit more prescribed from the state, and both have an end of course exam connected to the citizenship test that we anticipate the state will pass. One of the versions requires that for graduation and the other doesn't, so we're waiting to see how that works. And of course, top of our mind is the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan of the board and making sure that we follow those strategic goals. So trying to fit all of those pieces together has been a challenge for the team. We've worked extensively with the equity department and of course with the social studies teachers as well, and we're looking to find things that are going to engage students in a meaningful way and help them see themselves in our curriculum. And I feel like we're in a good spot. We're in the final stages of reviewing our curricular materials that we hope to get bids in on and then purchase for implementation in the fall of the 22-23 school year. And that will include, of course, training on the new materials from the publishers. That will happen as early as the last teacher workday, so that people have all summer. We're developing teams based on the courses that people will teach next year to help to rewrite some of the curriculum, revise the curriculum, and then integrate these new curriculum materials into that rewritten curriculum. So we anticipate seeing some differences in what the students experience next fall in their classes with these materials and the revised curricular units. So that's where we're at. And we have to make sure it syncs with our text systems because it's just not a textbook anymore. I mean, I think that's the thing I've realized probably is that I think about this as a book that you're buying. It's really a whole suite of materials, and it's really the content that you're purchasing. It's the formative assessment items and pieces that they have that sync with Canvas. So it's more than just, book. Of course, that content is important, but it's really the whole experience that the students have with the materials that you're purchasing. So I'm happy to take any questions. We have effectively 14 classes in social studies that we're looking at for new curricular materials.
I just want to thank you for the work your team has done. It's so important, and I'm so grateful that we can trust you guys to approach this with such sophistication and genuine concern for how you said you have to work in all these different considerations. So thank you times a million.
Thanks. Thanks, Maka.
This is, maybe you can't answer this, but what I'm wondering is, because our curriculum review is based on usually getting ready to buy a bunch of textbooks. Yep. And if that's not what's going to happen anymore, right? Things change much quicker. Information does change, doubles quite frequently. Should we look at that process? Because right now it's once every 7-8 years. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that you'll find is that the products that we're purchasing as part of the core content, or the core, curriculum materials have adapted as well. And so there's really, it's digital and print, and they're updating the digital in ways that doesn't outdate their print, but that keeps it more modern and updated. So, I would say publishers have gotten, a lot better at that. And I think being a one-to-one district, of course, that's a massive advantage for us with the devices that we have and the capabilities we have and the hotspots that we can get to families, that might need it. That, I think there's a lot of exciting things that you can do to keep it updated that aren't just necessarily, that print. Of course, I think we'd all love to see curriculum review happen. Your coordinators, there's a lot of pressure. They might not like me saying this, but I think we'd love to have a cycle that's, under 8 years. But given the range of things that we offer, making it manageable to have community involvement, board involvement of the teachers, that's probably the cycle that you're looking at. But I would also say, the plans that we develop have constant improvement and constant growth built within them. And so I think that's the thing that we got to make sure that we're doing as we develop our improvement plans across 8 years, is that it's not just, well, you purchase these things now and then in 8 years you'll come back at it. It's got to have built-in improvement that we're doing.
So from the financial perspective, so we buy a product,
Yep.
And then they update every now and again. In the past, sometimes when you come up to a budget pinch, like the first thing you put a pause on is curriculum review, because you're like, we can get a few more years out of those textbooks. But with subscription services, or are we going to have that flexibility to be able to and maybe this isn't a question for you, for staff, but are we going to have that flexibility if we're paying a subscription and we can't just put a pause on that, or we can't squeeze a few more years out of a subscription-based model? I'm just wondering. Hopefully we won't get into a budget crisis, but.
Yeah, I guess this would just be my perspective on it. I think the thing that teachers do, exceedingly well is to use those core curricular materials as a baseline that every student has access to and that we use to engage every student. And then we, of course, build off of those. And at the end of your 8 years, you're really talking about a pretty sophisticated set of curricular materials you're using around each of your standards. And so in the unfortunate event that we were putting a pause on something because of financial considerations, I feel pretty confident, at least with social studies, that we'd be able to say we can still engage the students in really amazing ways, and if we even have to pause. I'll just say, it used to be a 7-year model. We're 10 years in between the social studies purchase. So we did have to push pause, and I think we did okay. But I think it's a fair question, so.
Yeah, and we still have had to pay for some of those licensure fees, like you're talking about, JP. So even when we've delayed some of those cycles to keep the electronic materials going, yeah, we've continued to pick those up. And so maybe the savings wouldn't have been, isn't as realized as large, as it would have been otherwise. But yeah, it is a little bit harder to look at it that way.
And one might think that a subscription might be cheaper than a textbook, because we all know how expensive the textbooks are, right? But those companies providing those subscriptions that want the same amount of revenue as they got from selling textbooks, so they haven't priced themselves in such a way that they're going to lose money. So in net sum game, for what it costs us, it hasn't really changed a whole lot in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, we've approved those contracts. I've seen the zeros behind them. They're not, they're getting there.
There's a couple.
So Brady, I'm trying to make this a question that you can respond to. Do you think that that the review of the social studies curriculum has got us to the place where we can still teach social studies accurately, comprehensively, and truthfully to all students in the district?
Yes, I do. I think the way that I look at it, and the way that when I talk with teachers about it, obviously we want to be true to our state standards. Those are inquiry-based standards, And I think that's the advantage of the way that our state standards are written currently, is that they're not overly prescriptive. In fact, they're asking us to help students construct, compelling critical questions, to gather and evaluate evidence, to create claims, and to mobilize evidence in advance of those, and then to critique conclusions that they've made and that others have made. And so I think that's where powerful social studies is, and I think that you can then utilize, I think those are transferable thinking skills as well, and I think then you can, because you're engaging students in an authentic, honest, meaningful inquiry, that opens up the opportunity to have students direct their learning a little bit more, as well as engage with, curricular materials that are maybe different than the ones that I had when I was a student or that you had when you were a student. And so I think if we approach it that way, any concerns about, compliance with state laws and some of the discussion that we hear in the legislature, I feel confident that we can do it. I think it's better social studies teaching and learning in any case, and I think we can. It's certainly, there's been a lot of conversation about curriculum and curricular materials, not just social studies, but nationally, and we're aware of that. But yeah, I think we can. I hope we can. That's what we're committed to.
I'm sure you are, and I really commend you and the entire staff and the work you're doing. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Charlie.
Looking around, see if anybody else has any thoughts or questions. All right, anything else from the team on this topic? All right, I'll give you my thanks as well, Brady, for the update and all the work. Let's go ahead and move on to our next discussion item and our health and safety update.
Yeah, good evening again, everybody. COVID-related wise, you can continue to track our COVID numbers on our COVID dashboard. Kristen continues to update that. I think we shared at the last meeting we'd moved to the medium category for the community level in Johnson County. A few more staff absences. The student numbers held somewhat pretty consistent there in the 50 to 60 range over the last week. But it does, I don't know, it feels closer. It seems like some of the, maybe just folks we work closer with here at the office or some of the other folks in the district, it does feel a little bit closer. So we continue to monitor that as we go throughout. But I think really kind of the purpose of the health and safety update this evening was a little bit of some of the conversation started during agenda setting last week, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and just kind of talking about some of the behavior challenges that have been presented to us in the district this year. And, we recognized in a previous health and safety discussion that we've had situations that haven't met our expectations this school year, and I don't think are the standard we want set in the district or the standard we've come to expect in the district. And so, as a couple of the community commenters talked about, I think we are aware, we do care, and we have intervened in some of those situations. It doesn't mean that everything has necessarily gotten better immediately or that it's been a continual piece of improvement. And so our job as the district is to continue to look at what we do and to continue to try to support those buildings in different ways. And really, in a district in a district as large as ours, that has to be from a systems perspective. And what are the systems and frameworks that we have in place that allow our buildings to be successful? We would love to give everybody more resources, more staff. Unfortunately, we know that's not always a reality for us. And so that makes those systems working together especially critical, because when they don't, then we see the breakdown of those systems and we see events like we've experienced all throughout the school year in different situations that don't meet those standards that we have. And so some system-based things that you might think about when things aren't going well on a campus would be weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings with building-based leadership teams where we would review Tier 2 and Tier 3 plans and the staff's involvement with those students and what those plans leading to some student success would look like. Those can be special education, behavior intervention plans, or they could just be general ed plans where we're looking at trying to support students in an additional way. We've tried restorative practices. I think sometimes when we've talked about restorative practices in the district, people think that has meant the absence of disciplinary consequences. That's not it at all. Both of those have to work in concert with each other. We have to have clear expectations for our students, rules, procedures, guidelines that we hold our students accountable to. And then when things go wrong, that's how we repair the situation. We look for long-term repair through restorative practice because we know that a consequence isn't a long-term deterrent, that repairing a relationship, repairing a situation is how we start to fix the situation. We've done ongoing care assessment reviews throughout as we've been new to that process, even though we had it last year, as it still feels new this year as everybody's been back in our school as we go through. And so that's been a process we've tried to stand up to make sure that we can either wrap around or try to identify and head off future concerns, and trying to ensure that our discipline protocols and procedures are followed. I think like we've talked about with the restorative practice, and we've even talked a little bit about the conversation we've had around reducing suspensions, trying to reduce gaps when we see disparate gaps in our district, and then how that gets played out, sometimes in the building. And so for us, I think as a district, we have to continue to support our buildings to make sure they know how to go about both of those goals in the same way, that we have to have this safe, caring, collaborative environment you're going to hear me talk about in the next agenda item. And the only way we can do that is through relationships and care and support for kids, and having clear expectations of the policies and procedures we want folks to follow. So when those things have went wrong, you've seen us also commit additional administrators on certain campuses at different periods of time. That could be as small as a day to meet with the leadership team, or that could be for an extended period of time, as we've seen at Northwest Junior High with some additional support. We've relied on, whether it's law enforcement or other community agencies. UAY has been a great partner with us, where they've come in and done additional circles, or their community response teams that come in during a crisis. So for us, again, I think it's that continual system work, and I do think we acknowledge that, we share some of the blame in any of these situations. I don't think any school leader would sit here and tell you that when things go on like that with our kids that we feel good about it or think that we've done enough. I think that's our constant goal around continuous improvement. The conversation we really want to shift to is the next conversation we have, and I appreciated the commenter's point around the high reliability schools, that really at the root level, we have to have a safe, caring, collaborative culture. Otherwise, the other things we try to do, they never really realize their impact. And so then what are the system pieces we put in place as a district to make sure that that's the expectation we have across the board? And I'm happy to talk, I will talk to you about that in more in a few minutes. So questions you had there, I know that's kind of where we got to the conversation, but I wanted to just give a little brief overview. Some of us have all had that conversation, through some of our check-ins. Obviously, the team works on that every single day in different parts, but just from a holistic perspective, kind of on what's been the playing field and where we're hoping to go.
I'll just throw it out to directors for comments or questions.
I would just like to echo what you said about a safe, supportive environment in the school. The first duty of a school is to keep its students safe. And I just want to emphasize that.
I have a question unrelated to that. And again, I hate even to bring this up and knock on wood, we don't get worse, but at what point, if you could remind me, is our trigger for we might go back to some kind of a mask policy?
If you remember, the way we've tried to talk about the protocols, Director Clausen, is really related to those community levels and the guidance attached to the CDC. So I think this board's conversation around any kind of a future mask requirement would be incumbent upon the county switching to a high level of transmission, which seems like we're probably still relatively far away from based on previous data points we've seen set there. So that would be the next time. If we had something flip to the high, then I would assume we'd meet with you guys and have that conversation about what that meant for us.
Thanks.
I would just go back to the safety in our schools and the feeling of safety and security in our schools. And I don't know a board member that isn't prioritizing that, or an admin member that isn't prioritizing it. The problem is it's a lot of, it's not an easy thing to do. There are aggressive and violent behaviors around us, and we have to figure out new and different ways to address them. And I feel like everyone's been working on it. We talk about it at almost every meeting. So I think that I can easily say that it's a top priority for me and pretty much everyone that I'm working with in this role.
I agree.
I mean, I would just go back to, our work session that we had right before the board meeting, where some of the common themes that came through it, right, was the personal connections, right, between staff and students. And I think that's a real focus, I think, of our team, but a great focus, right, because just having a connection for a student to even one adult in the building, more would be better, right, but even having that one connection can can make a huge difference in that, that student's success and just feeling of belonging to something. So I was glad to hear that that was a big focus, right, of our conversation earlier tonight.
And just a quick comment on this, because I think sometimes this argument gets parsed out, right? There are people who believe in discipline or not, or there's this, like it's a zero-sum game. So when you talk about relationships, to me, a very important part of a healthy relationship is expectations and boundaries, right? That's what makes those relationships, and because I've had experience, right, at the secondary level when I was a teacher, for whom that wasn't always clear. That wasn't always clear from the staff, that some people thought they were being nice by not having expectations, and that is detrimental. And some folks thought they were building a relationship through tough love, but it was hard to see where the love was, right? And so I think the truth is, a really positive relationship has that embedded in it. It is positive because I hold you to expectations, because as a school community and as a school, we've decided this is how we represent ourselves. This is what citizenship means. I mean, that's throughout the whole PBIS framework and all this. Like, we define those things, and then we hold each other accountable, and that's what makes a really successful thing. So it's not as if we focus on relationships, we don't care about discipline. These things really go hand in hand, but it's probably not going to be what some people are used to, which is punishment, right? That's where I think people mix up. Discipline doesn't have to be a punishing thing, because what we know, that doesn't really work. Right? That doesn't really solve the problem. It moves the problem somewhere else, but it doesn't really get to the root of it. And so I don't want folks thinking restorative practices is going soft, right? Or that we only use restorative practices in some sort of, when there's a problem, right? The idea of restorative practices is this is how we build community, because it really works. When you really commit to it, you can see both of those things happening. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that and folks understand, well, we're going to do these things hand in hand. And I don't want folks thinking we're just going to go all one way and we're forgetting about this other stuff, because sometimes that's what I hear when, in emails and different community conversations that I have.
Any further conversation on this topic? All right, thank you, everyone. We can move on to our action items, and I know Superintendent Degner is very excited to show us some data, or a little presentation anyway.
Oh, it's telling me right there to do it. All right, hi again. So this is a good transition, because I think the why for behind this conversation really rests in what we were just talking about and kind of what landed us here in terms of looking at high reliability schools. For organizations, it's always important to have an improvement framework that you work from, and that JP was just talking about setting clear expectations. That's part of our job as a district, is to know and communicate to our buildings what those expectations are, just like when we have different expectations between teachers in a school building, how that becomes hard for a student to navigate. Well, we can't do the same. We can't be modeling a different type of behavior to our building leaders or to those out in the district. And so some kind of a standard way to look at our improvement efforts was very important to us, while also recognizing that when we look at our district goals, around two major components for us of this idea of excellence and equity, that what we experience in those situations a lot of times right now is a lot of variability. We have some pockets of excellence, definitely. We just, I think Brady pointed out tonight, 3 of our high schools are in the top 20 in the nation, right? But we still have variance, right? And there's still probably more variance there than we would like to see amongst some of those things. And we know we always talk about equity, right? Equitable outcomes for our kids is a definite priority for the district. And so when we look at what do we do to try to reduce that variability? Again, it lands us back to how do we talk about improvement in a consistent way? And so I always start from this premise that all of our students deserve an excellent education no matter the school they attend. When we say all kids means all, and that we're going to serve all of the kids in the Iowa City Community School District, the standard is excellence. That's an important guarantee I think we make in public education as we work on those ideas of continuous improvement and connecting all of our efforts. We do a lot of things in this district, right? And a lot of different We went from everything from mental health tonight to restorative practices to disciplinary and high expectations. We've already kind of talked about a big gamut of the triangle on the social, emotional, behavior, mental health side. We haven't even necessarily touched on some of the teach and learning aspect, but we did talk about social studies, right? And so we know that there's two major sides of this, and we have a lot of efforts that we undertake and that we say yes to. So to do this in a effective way, we need to be able to differentiate support to our schools and solidify foundational expectations across the district. We need to have a standard of expectation. Those parents that spoke to us at Weber, they need to have an expectation of what happens in that school environment. Just like at Lemmy, where my children go, those set of expectations need to be consistent between our schools, and that should be foundational for us. As we continue to talk about this improvement model, I think what you're going to see us focus on a little bit is trying to make sure that those efforts are streamlined. When I say that we take on a lot of different aspects in the district, you see the energy ball here on the left is I think kind of our current reality sometimes. We're all over the place, right? And we're put a lot of energy in a lot of different initiatives and work in the district, and those are all initiatives, and they're all very important initiatives. The problem is when we don't articulate a plan about how to go about accomplishing those, that energy gets dispersed in too many different ways, and it doesn't lead to sustained improvement. So what we're excited about is creating the energy ball that you see on the right there, where we actually channel that energy into a continuous improvement path that leads to what we see as better outcomes for our kids. So that's some of the why about, I think, why we landed here, remembering that we have those goals around excellence and equity, and that we want to try to reduce that variability and create a more consistent experience that really has the highest level of expectations when we serve all of our kids. But what is high reliability schools? I think that's kind of the next question. Okay, well, what is this, right? And so you've heard me talk about it's a school improvement framework. I think the most important thing to point out first is what's the base level, right? And that's what we've touched on a couple times, is safe, supportive, and collaborative culture. That we can talk about competency-based education if we wanted to, or we could talk about standards reference reporting, but if your culture isn't in a good place, anything you try to do on that top level, again, you're not going to realize the impact of any of those improvement efforts. So the focus has to really take this building block approach that we'll come back to here in just a second as well. So we've kind of worked on a saying that we want to continue to practice with this. You guys have heard me say it at a previous meeting, and this is one that we'll ask our educational leaders and also whether it's teacher leaders or whether it's our principals talk about this, but there's really three big components to what is high reliability schools or this improvement framework when we talk about it. And so we speak of it as a framework that supports fulfilling our district vision of equitable outcomes for all kids. This idea of all, again, and that we have to have equitable outcomes. It gives us common language to name what we're doing, so some consistent languaging, assess our current reality, where are we right now, what's the current playing field, align our initiatives, that was that visual I just showed you a minute ago, and determine where to go next. I think a lot of times that's where we also end up with that diverted energy, is when we're unsure and we just say, well, yeah, that'll help kids, so let's do that too. Well, is that the next step in our process? Is that the right time to take it on? So it's a vehicle that allows us to balance shared responsibility and autonomy to make the decisions that best meet the needs of all of our students. I think that's another challenge for us sometimes in a large district, is how do we make sure there's enough autonomy to be responsive to it? We had a perfect example tonight with mental health and the SEL curriculum. Is there a time that we need to have some standardization in the district? Of course. Is there some time where we could allow for some flexibility? Probably, right? And we probably should. I mean, if there's an SEL curriculum and it works for that campus and it's implemented, maybe we can be okay with that, right? And that's some autonomy for that school building. There might be another time where we say, no, we don't really like the variance that would be created in that instance. But this, I think, creates shared responsibility between the district and between the school buildings, so we avoid some of even the conversation we've had here tonight. Well, whose fault is it, right? Well, it's all of our fault, or it's all of our success. We share in all of those things, but we need to figure out what is the sweet spot to that, and how do we talk to each other about where the improvement efforts lie. So the improvement framework, as you've seen there, has 5 different levels. And the way I like to describe it is it becomes the plate of the work. And you see one of these nice, whether it's a cafeteria plate. They didn't like my picture this morning, so I changed it to a much more colorful picture than what was in the presentation this morning at Cabinet. And so you have the fun colors there. But I think about it like it becomes the plate, we become more organized and intentional around our work. And you've heard me talk about the building block approach, and you see this picture, even the plates are nice and stacked, ready to go for you there, but one builds on top of the other. So the focus year one really has to be on this safe, collaborative, caring culture for our kids, and that's the relationship piece that we've talked a lot about tonight. That's also having the clear and consistent expectations so that we bring those two in concert together. And all of the things we've talked about, whether it's the SEBH work, it's the equity work, and the cultural responsiveness that landed us into some of the mental health PD that you saw from us this year, all of those things that we try to do to create a great environment for our kids, that's level one work. We have tons of stuff going on in level one, okay? But every building is going to be in a different spot. And part of what this allows us to do is we start to look at data to say, okay, well, how is this campus different from this campus over here? Because their needs are going to be very different. We just hired a brand new principal at one of our school buildings, right? Well, we have a veteran principal that's been over here 10 to 15 years. They're going to be most likely in very different spots in this framework in a relatively quick fashion, just because of the systems that have been in place in those campuses. Maybe a new principal stepping into a campus where those systems were going, right? Everything was working. Maybe another principal stepping into a campus that there's some work to do, right? And there's some efforts we're going to have to work to clean up. But that's where we get into this conversation around the leading and lagging indicators. That's the data that we would measure and that we'd look at from the improvement effort in the school district. So the one thing I want to caution everybody against, because I did it too the first time I read it, lagging, right away we think, oh, that means that there's something wrong. Okay, well, that's not really what a lagging indicator is. The leading indicators are the 20, really what we're going to say are the most important things in those first three levels. Those are identified for us. The lagging indicators are actually the results that are produced from monitoring the effects of leading indicators. So when Dr. Acosta talked to us here a couple weeks ago at Liberty, we actually kind of pushed back on him in some of the breakouts because he had a lot of artifacts on his lagging indicators, but there wasn't maybe data that supported the effectiveness of those things. And so, but it was an interesting conversation because I think also what he showed us is we wouldn't have these artifacts if it wasn't making a difference, right? And so I think there's some good conversation that'll come from that. We'll work through with our school buildings what the leading and lagging indicators look like and how they measure those. Those would be the important things for us to want to continue to check on, and it's constant. I also think about it like it's a constant temperature check about where you're going. And what we'll have to be careful of is not overreacting to the data, but also not underreacting to it and deciding which are those most critical pieces for us to look at. So the last concept I want to talk to you about is this idea of simultaneity. And simultaneity means that we're a school and we're going to continue to do a lot of good things for kids. We're a school district. We can't stop the other work while we work on level one. We have to continue to work on all three of those levels. And if you go back and you remember what those levels were, these are things we should be doing all the time. Effective teaching in every classroom, guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we are going to continue those improvement processes in those areas, but where our core focus has to be is on that base level. Because like we've talked about a few times, and you've heard me say now, if we don't get that right, anything we do here is really going to have limited impact or we're not going to realize our full impact. So we work on all three of those levels, and that's why you see me mention the 20 indicators, because as these next three slides aren't probably as exciting, but what you see here, what you can pull up closer to you, are the different leading indicators for the levels. So the first one, like was read to us here a little bit ago, the faculty and staff perceive the environment as safe and orderly. All right, well, if we collect data and that data comes back to us and shows that they don't perceive the environment as safe and orderly, all right, now it creates the what are we going to do about it question, right? Okay, so what's the response there, all right? And the same thing, well, what if there's a disconnect between the faculty and staff perceive it's true, but the students, parents, and community don't perceive that? Then we have a different kind of disconnect, right? That we have to address. There's another critical part of this first level that talks about teacher teams and really being professional learning communities is a real base level function of this work, because if we don't create that as part of our culture, effective teaching in every classroom and guaranteed and viable curriculum on levels 2 and 3 become very difficult to achieve. So that is also a critical indicator for us in this first level as you look at those 8. But we know the safe and supporting caring environments are important in 1.1, 1.2, and then the 1.4 about the teacher teams is another one you'll hear us continue to talk a lot about. And then you can look at the other 2 levels here. I won't go through any examples necessarily there other than to say Not only are we talking and having conversations about we obviously are moving forward with this school improvement framework, but we're also looking at an instructional framework for really the same purposes, right? When we try to work with our teaching staff, they need to have clear expectations for what good teaching looks like, how to improve your teaching practice. Our veteran teachers all the way to our beginning teachers, talking the same language around those improvement efforts is important for us. And so we've sent some folks to a conference in Minneapolis here a couple weeks ago around the new art and science of teaching. And so that's the little fancy book you see inserted here on this picture that talks about the effective teaching in every classroom and what that is and what that looks like. And then the third level is really around the guaranteed and viable curriculum. And kind of think our curriculum coordinators there, right, is an important piece of that work and some of the work that, again, in the simultaneity aspect of it, they will continue to work on this year. We're going to continue to work on being the best teachers and leaders we can be in level 2, but really the thing we're going to start measuring and paying a lot of attention to, not that we don't already measure it, because a lot of our measures that we do have are going to be indicators for us here, but is really the level 1 work and finding success in that, because that's what we need to start the school year with, is making sure that when we come back in the fall, we can have a great conversation with our community around the fact that these are things you can expect out of our schools, and if we're not meeting the expectations in those areas, here's our plan to address it. So that was an overview, because we have a rather large contract in front of you about coaching our teams to do this, and so instead of just putting it on the consent agenda, a couple of you had the idea about to go ahead and pull that off, and let's just do a little intro conversation around it, and so I hope that was helpful and informs why we think this work is so critical to coach our leaders on it in the district. So any questions or things I could go back over for you?
I would just say the more we talk about this and inform the board and the community, the better, because it is a lot for all of us to understand this framework. So I like the repetition and the messaging so that all of us can really grasp what will be happening at our schools next year and in the future.
I just wanted to say that I was one of the board members, along with Charlie and Mary Kate, that had the opportunity to go to Liberty and watch the presentation, and that helped a lot. It seems overwhelming, but every time I hear it, it makes more and more sense, and so I think it's just something that us as board members are going to have to kind of dig in and put the time in to understand it, because the excitement that was in the room was really fun to experience, and I think that the admin that were there who are much more articulate in this language really are excited to do this work.
Yeah, I'd say having a room filled with excitement when they're looking at a lot of work ahead of them is telling, right? I mean, it was a presentation about this is what it's going to take to get you guys to become this kind of model. And even though it's going to take so much, the energy and the reception was very positive.
What was the makeup of that crowd?
It was our administrative council, so principals, assistant principals, and then teacher leaders. So a lot of teacher leadership folks we had there as well. And I can tell you, I think the most exciting thing for them that we saw in the survey feedback, the exit slip feedback we had, was this visual I tried to show you here tonight. I mean, I think that's the exciting part to them. They do feel like, I think an honest critique of us, as district leaders, and our work with you guys as a board is like, okay, we start to do this, and then we go do this, right? And then we're back over here. Which way do you want us to go, Matt? Type of thing. And so that's the part that we're excited about. The common language has been another one that they said. It gives us a common way to continue to talk about improvement. So hearing that feedback to us, I think, is especially important, because if we're serious about the educational environment right now, they need something to be excited about too, right? I mean, it's been tough, right? And so giving them something to feel like inspired and fulfilled that this is going to make a difference, and there is a workable path for us to think about how all of these pieces fit together, back to that picnic, table plate analogy. I think they feel a lot of confidence in that and feel like this isn't going to be another thing. This is the thing that actually starts to put the puzzle together.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, I think, if teachers and administrators were afraid of hard work, they sure wouldn't be in education, right? So, but I think you got to know it's getting somewhere, especially when you're going to take on a new initiative, because we all know, like, the stereotype in education is, here's another thing, this will be gone in 2 years, and there will be another new thing. I mean, that's been the last 40, 50 years, right? It's just this constant new fad, new thing. I think some people feel that way about SEL, like, oh, that's just the latest thing. But if you can show results, and people believe you're gonna get from that mess to that straight line, I mean, that gives me a lot of hope of the sustainability of this. And that's what I guess I wanna also emphasize, is that, you know, we go in whole hog, and we keep our nose to the grindstone. It's like the work we've done with equity. I think one thing that I'm really proud of is we haven't tried to do these quick, flashy fixes that look real good but don't have a lot of sustainability. That we've really done some foundational work, you know, maybe not in this exact framework, but we have been trying to build it like this. You know, take our initiatives, understand, even going back to the John Hattie stuff, like what's going to be the most effective thing for us to focus on. And Matt, you know, you've been talking to us about that for a couple of years now. Like, we really can't do everything. Let's try to do a few things well. So, you know, if those folks are excited, you know, then that's where it's going to start to translate that excitement into staff. And I think once people start to see results, you know, it's just an exciting proposition.
I wish I could have been there on Friday to see that. I'm very encouraged to hear that they're very excited about this and doing the work. I like the philosophy of it, the focus on safe, supportive schools. I think that's what I was just trying to get at. I think my tone earlier was maybe off for other reasons. But I like their focus on safe, supportive schools and the importance of relationships. And I so agree that we have often gotten distracted by all the sidebar things. And so the straight shot, that's a nice visual. I think that's what we need to go for.
Thanks, guys.
I can also envision students being greatly excited about this approach, this framework. I mean, this is a way of organizing. If I'm a student, it's a way of organizing the educational enterprise that I'm a student in. A student, you know, teacher will teach in the way that they're capable of. There'll be a lot of support for them to teach. There'll be a lot of support for me to learn. And there will be a lot of things I can do. There's a lot of opportunities here for me to have input into what's happening in my education in this school system.
I think back to what Director Clausen had talked about with, you know, you guys, I repeat myself sometimes, but we talk about all the time that most of the things we do in education, right, help kids. It's just, again, back to that Hattie stuff, figuring out the thing that makes the biggest difference, because we don't have time to spend on all the different pieces. I think the part, you know, and if you've spent any time around education, you know, names like Marzano and DeFore, you know, come with heavy credibility right around their work. And what they, I think, have brought to schools in this vein is, here's the way you do all of those things well, because our list isn't getting any shorter, guys, right? I mean, we know that we're going to continue to get pressures on our time and ways to do that, but here's a roadmap, right, for how you do it. Here's a consistent way to look at it in your large organization with, you know, multiple over 20 elementary schools and several secondary attendance centers. Here's a way you can actually make all of these things talk to each other and work forward. So you can probably, you know, tell I'm excited about it too, right? And I think if I gave Amy the microphone, she'd talk about what she's excited about. Chase would share his, and the rest of the team would talk about it too. So we've been really close to this work the last, you know, month or two for that matter. You just haven't seen us probably outwardly talk about it as much, but it's been a big part of our time here as we've spent in the spring, and it will be throughout the summer.
All right, I don't want to forget that this was on our action item list, so I think I'd take this opportunity to entertain the motion.
I move that we approve the high reliability schools professional development.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion at this point? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. that takes us to our legislative update. Man, I don't know if you have a whole lot. I mean, everything I read is that we're sort of in stall time in Des Moines.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to report back as far as the legislative update goes. I will continue to put the UEN link in your board update where you kind of get the information from the Urban Ed Network, but we do believe they're just kind of waiting it out right now, and there isn't really any significant movement since the last time we talked, which was a couple weeks ago. So
I think the House is just gaveling in and gaveling out.
Let's go ahead and move on. We have our Director Liaison report. You can read them all there. I don't know, was there anything that folks wanted to highlight?
Only that a few meetings ago you picked on us for not filling ours out, but then sometimes people do and sometimes people don't. And this time only Director Finch and I hadn't filled ours out, and since we're the newbies, Director Finch, do you want to add something, or should we just do it next time? We did all the things that
We
these
did all the
guys
things,
did.
all the things. We were
Yeah,
there.
we did all the things, okay? And we'll try to all, now that we understand that everyone is going to be doing this more religiously, we'll make sure that we do it too.
I believe you. I saw you at some of those things, so I know you were there.
I would just like to mention that I went to the Lemmy renovation opening dedication, and Sean, the president, gave a wonderful speech there, so thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Well, speaking
didn't
of
like
wonderful
mine, Charlie?
speeches, the
That's
Silver
all Kristen's
Salute
work.
was another of Sean's shining moments.
Wow.
But I will say, I really appreciate that event every year. I just think that taking the time to recognize all of the folks who've dedicated so much time, it's always really inspiring. It's just, you never walk away from that without this great appreciation for all of the folks that put in, every, group in the district, just all of the years of experience. We're really lucky. You hate to see those folks go, because those are some of our best, most capable teachers, but then again, wish them well in their retirement, so.
I was going to highlight the Silver Salute as well. What it was different to me from this year, from last year. Last year was such a large number, and I don't know how many folks were at the Silver Salute last year. I don't remember what the total, it was like 100 some people were being honored, and I don't know how that split between 25 years versus retirees, but it was a lot. And I think we all know how rough a time it was, and so it's hard to fault anybody for wanting to leave. And I think it was also just sort of a time that, it helped our district too, right? We know that kind of the early retirement helps us financially, but it is such a huge loss to lose that many years of experience. I think they announced that, right? Like, I don't know if Matt does that in his little speeches, like this many years of experience is retiring, and I think the number's always staggering, but last year was scary how large it was and kind of hurtful. So it was a pleasant surprise to see the number much smaller, but it still hurts every time you see that many years of experience go out our doors. To bigger and better things in a lot of cases, though, so I'm very happy to be able to do that. All right. Any other thoughts on Director Liaison? All right, I feel weird going to this next item and do a school board recognition. I kind of want to just do this and move on. I don't know.
I'll be happy to pat you on the back, Sean. How about
All
that?
right.
Yeah. So we gave each of you guys a certificate there this evening, and just wanted to thank you for your service. It is School Board Recognition Month, and I think it's important for our community to know there's no compensation that goes along with anything they do. This is something they choose to do, and they volunteer their time pretty much every single Tuesday. We don't get too many Tuesdays off. Even when there's a fifth Tuesday, a lot of times we end up having meetings. And a lot of you pulled double duty during the COVID time, and just we have a lot of engagement in our community, which leads us to a lot of good places, but it's also super time intense and it's super emotional at different points for people. And so the time you do spend away from your families and the time you commit to service in this school district is definitely recognized, and I think the kids in our district are definitely better for all of you being here. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you, Matt. I would like to thank all my colleagues up here. You make this job easier knowing that we're doing it together. I'm going to steal the little drawing of putting our energy all going in the same direction, because I think that's important for us to remember as an entity as well, not just, the schools and the staff there. It's for us as well, so that's makes it easier for us. All right, let's move on to our agenda setting. Do we have an Ed Committee meeting next week that's not on here?
Yes, we will do Ed Committee next week on the 17th, and we're looking at 4:30 start around CTE again. So currently we're working with John Reynolds around some of their ACE projects in the Home Builders Association, and I think trying to get GT there as well, right, to talk to us a little bit about future plans. So that'll be Education Committee next week.
Okay.
I'm sorry, where did you say that's at?
I don't know yet.
Oh,
Wherever they're building the deck is where we'll be, Jane, but I don't know. Sandusky Road, Nick says? Okay, yeah.
I missed that, the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I didn't say it, so we're good.
All right, so that will be next week on the 17th, and then on the 24th, we have a P&G meeting. We'll kind of go through our 6 through 9s that we talked about last time, and we'll have that second reading coming back later. I want to get it on everybody's radar. I don't know if we've completely landed on it, but there's potential for a closed session meeting between P&G and the board meeting. So just be aware you might have to get here a little bit early if you're not in P&G. And then we have our regular board meeting, and it has a lot of the usual suspects. So we have another education showcase coming to us. I've really enjoyed that last one. That was awesome.
That was good.
And like I said, we'll have our second reading on our policies and take action on them. And it looks like we have a budget amendment action as well. And then, like I said, all of the regular stuff. And apparently we've already pulled personnel from consent, according to this. We'll see if we do that. There are other things that we need to get on there. I know it's going to be a busy night with the other meetings, so.
One of the things that I'd like to have a discussion about, and it doesn't have to be on the 24th, but maybe just sometime in the next few meetings, are how we do our boundaries, specifically how we can think about proactively addressing our undeveloped land, and maybe being more thoughtful so that, we did this whole redistricting procedure, 3 years ago? And I think one of the reasons that led to that is how development is being done, and that we're seeing high-end development concentrated in certain areas and more affordable housing concentrated in other areas. And as long as that continues to happen and we don't proactively be thoughtful about that, we are going to have schools with very low FRLs and very high FRLs and being unbalanced. And I'm wondering if we could have a conversation about redoing how our undeveloped land is boundaried, and maybe something like we don't necessarily assign that land to the school that's nearest to them, that we wait and see what development looks like and how the development is going to fit into our goals of maintaining equalized FRL numbers for the schools, and then be open to saying, you may not go to your closest school, but you may go to a different school to keep proportionalities, just to try to, I just feel like if we don't stay ahead of this housing zoning issue, we're going to find ourselves back in a situation that we were 3-4 years ago, and we're going to have to redo the boundaries that impacts everybody. Can we do something now that doesn't impact a single person, really, because it's unzoned land, and then try to fix problems before they start, I guess?
Thanks, Lisa, for bringing this up. I'm really interested in getting this on a meeting agenda at some point as well. As some of you know, I spent 10 years on the Iowa City Planning and Zoning Commission, and we struggled again and again and again with residential developments that made it difficult for this district to have, especially elementary schools, that had reasonable housing priced land within their attendance area. And I think that there are some things that we could look to do together with the surrounding communities and their zoning efforts, so we can have a better outcome over time.
All right. I made a note of it. Is there other stuff? I don't know. Mary Kate, were you gonna say something, or are you just gonna?
Oh, no.
Okay. Other items for that meeting? Anything from you, Matt, or the team for that meeting that's not on there already? Or something will come up between now and then, but.
Yeah, I'll probably have something for you by agenda setting, but nothing for this evening.
All right. With that, if there's nothing else, that takes us to the end, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you everyone for coming tonight.